here I am about to be 58 and I've got a new baby due any day now. And people think that's weird and crazy, but if you study Sir Robert McCarrison's work and his investigation into the Hunza, he identified there was men 110 years of age in northern India still farming and working in the fields, running ox-driven plows and siring new children, right, at 110. But, my first son is going to turn 40 this summer. I think I was 54 when Angie got pregnant with Mana, which was quite a shock to me, actually, to all of us. And one of the things that began happening to me spontaneously is that my heart started to open energetically. I'd be sitting and watching a TV show in the evening after work with Angie, and it might be, something that normally I wouldn't watch because I would watch something that she would like, and I would find myself seeing an emotional scene and I would have tears pouring out of me, or I'd be watching The Voice, which is, one of my favorite shows of all time, and I would see young people really meeting their fears and expressing themselves fully. And tears would just flow out of me. And I would be sitting there going, who is this crying? I'm an ex-82nd Airborne Division paratrooper who was raised by a badass father who would beat you senseless for not doing what you were told when you were told. So to survive my childhood, I had to learn to repress all those feminine emotions and all those feelings. And being a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division just magnified all that. But with the coming of my child, and the energy that that child brought into the relationship, it's as though the subtle awareness of that child coming and the soul of that child's presence in my field was conditioning me to get ready to be a daddy again. And I found myself going through a transformation. And then when Mana was born, he's a very physically active, highly intelligent child and loves to get in trouble. And so I started realizing that my rigidities about things just had to go. For example, I have some very expensive speakers at home on a stereo, very exotic studio monitors that are really high end. And the next thing you know, Mana's poking the cones in. I'm like, oh my God, don't do that. And I would say, Mana, no. And I'd grab his hand and he would poke it even harder. And he thought it was a game, right? Then my beautiful home's covered in toys everywhere. And everything, the tablecloth is sideways and there's stuff laying everywhere. And I'm finding myself inside wanting to just say no all the time. But I realized he's just having fun and he's living. And having studied childhood development, one of the most dangerous words you can give a child is no, because it creates an inhibitory reflex. It shuts them down inside. So they become fearful of expressing themselves for fear that they're going to get reprimanded. And then they grow up to be people that are so repressed in their creativity that they're afraid to do anything that doesn't get approval. So that, and then with Mana's arrival, I found that my natural ability to observe children and watch how they interact and pay more attention to what they were saying and to see what happens when older people start interacting with children, well, you see that they start talking like children and making facial expressions like children. And next thing you know, they're sitting on the floor playing with dolls. And what I found is that the children actually inject youth into us to the degree that we allow ourselves to meet them at their level. It's interesting too, because Steiner has a very, very deep, very powerful, effective teaching philosophy that's the basis of the Waldorf school system. And Angie goes to these meetings where teachers educate the parents. And recently, in one of the meetings, they were explaining that parents generally should not play with their children because most parents are so rigid and so outcome-oriented They keep trying to control the play. And like a child, like my son, Mana, will spend half an hour making a truck out of Legos and then pick it up and throw it across the room because he loves watching it fly to pieces. But the adult urge is, why would you do that? Or you build him a toy and you think he's going to play with it and he destroys it, and you're then trying to tell him not to do that. And then I've had to watch myself and just say, wow, let's make another one, instead of, oh my God, why did you ruin that? I just spent a half an hour making that for you. So, it's to highlight the point, though, we now have school teachers telling parents that the best thing you can do is just watch and make sure the child is safe, but do not intervene in their playfulness, or you will disrupt their normal growth and development. So if you take that warning as an indication of what the aging process really is, if it's not healthy, then you flip it over. And on the other side of the coin is play with children, act like children, and don't do anything except keep them safe. And you yourself will begin to authentically euthanize yourself, and the children will teach you how to be a healthy, wise child. And that's what's missing in our culture. When you're playing with a child, you're actually engaging in infant development. You're crawling on the floor. You're rolling on the floor. You're rocking. Those movements turn out to be the foundation of the very movements we have to do to survive in nature, which are squatting, lunging, bending, pushing, pulling, and twisting, as well as gait, which is walking, jogging, and sprinting. To keep up with a kid, you will have to walk, jog, and occasionally sprint, especially if it's my kid. You tell him, Mana, don't go on the road. Okay, well, the next thing you know, he's running on the road. Why? Because he thinks it's a game, right? He doesn't know that a 4,000-pound car can flatten him. He thinks it's a game. So if you're watching a child like that, you've got to be ready to move with them. And so what do you find? Most grandparents today can't last 5 minutes with a child. In fact, one time, 9 people, I had a family reunion, 9 people came to visit us, of my family. And we were sitting at dinner one day, and my sister, my half-stepsister, who's 6 months older than I am, said, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but there's 9 of us, and Mana wore every one of us out today, and he's still got lots of energy. So what do you see? A 3-year-old physically conditioned 9 people. And if you kept those 9 people there with him for 90 days, they would leave physically, emotionally, and mentally more enlivened and more vital. So, movement can be looked at from a physical perspective, from an emotional perspective. Whenever we don't let our emotions flow, for example, we've got a culture where men are considered wimpy or pussies if they cry, which is why it was so shocking for me when my emotions started to flow when Angie was pregnant with Mana. I'm like, I had to learn to allow that. And both of the girls said, it's great to see you cry, let it happen, and so I felt safe to cry. Feelings buried alive never die, and if they're negative feelings, then that basically becomes a source of self-doubt, self-shame, self-guilt, self-denial, which requires that you conform to other people to feel loved, which means that you need other people's approval because you haven't learned to love and appreciate yourself, which is what the elders in healthy tribal societies taught kids to do. They inspired each child to see, feel, experience, and explore its own genius, as opposed to telling it what it had to or couldn't do. As long as the kids are safe, then it's good to let them become, and as long as we can be safe becoming with them, then we have the most magical anti-aging. So even at any time in the history, anybody that spends time with a child learns something from a child in a very few minutes. My son says things at 3.5 years of age that blow our minds and figures things out. I'll give you an example of how quick you can learn something from a 3-year-old. I've been driving my Audi A3 since 2007. The first time Mana got into that car when he was old enough to not be strapped into a car seat and to play around in it, he just likes to sit in the car and pretend he's driving it. Him and I got in the car, and all of a sudden I look and there's a drawer sticking out on the dashboard. And I said, Mana, how did you do that? And he pushed it in, and then he pushed it again. I've been driving this car since 2007. There's a secret drawer that's spring-loaded that you could put joints or jewelry or things, and I guess it's meant to be hidden so people can't find it, so you can put money or whatever in it. I never knew that was there. He found it in about 35 seconds. And he can figure out how to open anything. He'll have the fuel door open, the hood open, the trunk open, with no education whatsoever. Okay, here I am, 50, at that time probably 55, 56, and my kid's teaching me how to use my own car. You just spend time with kids and you will see profound wisdom coming out of them that doesn't come out of anybody else.
Hey, I'm Kale. I've spent the last 10 years researching health and well-being, and I think I've got it pretty figured out. I'm travelling to visit the world's healthiest people. These tiny communities have the longest lifespans of any culture on Earth.
Welcome to Ghana.
This is Okinawa, Japan. They're happier, have less disease, and an incredible quality of life. And I've come here to learn their secrets.
Stop the trumpet. It's enough.
In the West, we are aging terribly. For the first time in history, the average kid born today can expect to live a sicker life and die younger than their parents.
There is a bit of a gauntlet that we need to cross of our comfort zone.
I want to experience the culture for what it is, but when a lot of it clashes with what you believe, it's hard.
Green smoothies, yoga, that fanatical approach to wellness is probably going to shorten your life.
Social isolation and withdrawal are worse for us than smoking, obesity and substance abuse.
They're just doing life, and they're doing life well.
You need to act young, and that's what these guys are doing. They're 20 years younger in those moments. $10 in the morning and the wine tastes like it's been spiked with vodka. Better start dancing soon, I hope.